Section 9.6. Our objective today is I can solve problems involving angles formed by chords, secants, and tangents. So first of all, let's look at a circle where we have two chords that intersect. So let's say we have this chord and this chord. And notice that when the chords intersect, they form four angles. And we know by vertical angles that this angle has to be congruent to this one, and this one has to be congruent to this one. Also notice that the angles intercept, or the chords, I should say, intercept arcs. Okay? So those two intercept those arcs, and these angles intercept these arcs. Okay. So our first theorem says, this is a theorem, the measure of an angle formed by two chords that intersect, or intersect, I should say, inside a circle equal to half the sum of the measures of the intercepted arcs. Okay, so for instance, I have chord QS and chord PR, and I want to know the measure of angle 1. But I know that arc QP is 45 degrees, and I know that arc RS is 75. And so the measure of angle 1 equals 1/2 times the measure of arc QP plus the measure of arc RS. So in other words, 1/2 45 plus 75. So that's 120. So that gives us 60 degrees. So measure of angle 1 equals 60 degrees. So this is 60 degrees, that one has to be 60 also. And then if this is 60, we know this one has to be 120. Okay? So, and notice that the chords just have to intersect. They do not have to intersect at the center. They can intersect anywhere in the circle. So we could do something, I mean, if it was something like this, okay, where we know that this is 80, this is 20, and we want to know the measure of this angle, then measure of angle X would just be 1/2 80 plus 20, or 50. Okay, and notice that the angles formed there are always inside the circle. Okay, now we want to look at angles formed by tangents or secants. So notice that if I have two tangents from a point outside the circle, then notice that the angle formed by those two tangents, two secants, these are secants, is outside the circle. If I have a secant and a tangent, again, notice that the angle formed is outside the circle. So anytime the angle is outside the circle, then the intercepted arcs, we have this one that's on the opposite side of the circle, and we have this one closer to the angle. In this one we have this one and this one. Notice that the one further away from the angle is, the arc further away from the angle is always going to be a larger arc. Okay, so the theorem says the measure of an angle formed by two secants, two tangents, or a secant and a tangent drawn from a point outside a circle is equal to half the difference. Notice it's a difference now of the measures of the intercepted arcs. Okay, so if the angle is inside, it's the sum, half the sum of the intercepted arc. If the angle is outside, it's half the difference. So if I have this situation where I have two secants, this is point D, point E, A, B, and C. And DC, arc DC has measure of 100, and arc EB has measure of 40. And I want to know the measure of angle A. Angle A is outside the circle, so it's going to be 1/2 the difference of the intercepted arcs. So measure of angle A is 30. Okay? Right? If I have a secant and a tangent, where this is Y, this is Z, this is W, this is X, and this is point V. Okay? And I know that angle W is 65 degrees, and I know that measure of arc XZ is 70, and what I want to know is the measure of this arc. Well, angle W is outside the circle, so measure of angle W is equal to half the measure of arc YVX minus the measure of arc ZX. Well, I know angle W is 65. I don't know measure of arc YVX, so I'm going to let that be X. And I know that arc ZX is 70. Okay? Then from there it's just algebra. I want to get rid of this 1/2, so I'm going to multiply both sides by 2. So this is 130 is equal to X minus 70. So then I'm going to add 70 to both sides. So I get 200 equals X. So measure of arc YVX is 200 degrees. Okay? And then the final example is if I have two tangents. Okay? So this is S, this is R, this is Q, and this is point P. And I want to know the measure of angle P. And so I know that QRS, which is this one, I know that one is 240 degrees. And if that's 240, then I know that arc QS, because I take 360 and subtract 240, has to be 120 degrees. So this arc has to be 120. I want to know angle P. So it's 1/2 the difference, so 240 minus 120. Oops. So I get 120 times 1/2, so measure of angle P is 60 degrees. Okay? Alright, so in general, well, let's do just one more. Okay, this is 2 tangents. I know that this is 230, and I need x. If that's 230, 230 or 360 minus 230 is 130. So I know this has to be 130. So measure of angle x has to be 1/2 230 minus 130. So x has to be 50 degrees.